I'm at that point in life where I've got 3 or 4 different pairs of glasses. So let me remove the music glasses, put on the glasses so I can see you and see what I'm preaching this morning. It's good to see all of you here. Well, this morning we're going to be beginning a series about questions Jesus asked. Now, you may have not really thought much about the fact that Jesus really asked a lot of questions. In fact, some commentators write that in the Gospels, there's recorded over 300 questions that Jesus asked. So here's a question for you. Why do you think Jesus asked so many questions? Well, here's a few reasons why he may have. One is for engagement, because when you ask questions, you're providing space for a dialogue. Then it just doesn't become just a one-sided monologue. You're not just doing all the talking while somebody's doing all the listening. Another reason he may have done it is because it helps to build relationships. When you ask questions, it draws things out of people. They begin to share how they think and how they feel with you. Perhaps Jesus also asked some questions to force those who were listening to him to think a little bit more, rather than just regurgitating or just listening all the time. They had to think, because, questions really are a great learning tool. Also, his listeners were more likely to own their own conclusions, because it helps you to process things a little bit better when you're answering questions. And sometimes he asked warm-up questions really to get the conversation going. Now, it wasn't that Jesus didn't know the answers to these questions that he was asking. He knew. But he wanted those he was talking to be a part of the conversation. He wanted them to learn to think for themselves. For example, in Mark 8, beginning at verse 27, this is what we read. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" Now, do you think that Jesus didn't know what people were thinking about him? Like, who did they say he was? Of course he did, but he wanted his disciples to think about it, because then he followed up their answer with another question. But what about you? Who do you say I am? It was a brilliant way of getting them to think. And today, we're going to look at the questions that Jesus asked of Simon Peter, as my husband read earlier. So why this encounter between Jesus and Simon Peter? Well, I believe that it was to let Peter know that Jesus still loved him and had not cast him out. He had a purpose for his life. You see, in John 15:6, Jesus had told them, "If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned." Even though he said that, you see, the Lord is not quick to cast people out. He's not quick to throw them away. This whole encounter was about Peter's restoration. And Jesus also wanted Peter to really think about something, perhaps a little bit more deeply than he had thought about it before. Do you remember what happened the night before Jesus' crucifixion? During the Passover meal, Jesus told Peter that Peter was going to disown him 3 times before the rooster crowed. And that's exactly what happened. Even though Peter had been very adamant that he would lay down his life for Jesus, even if everybody else would fall away, he would remain true. But as soon as the pressure came, he denied that he even knew Jesus. But we have a God who is slow to anger, abounding in love, not willing that any should perish, but that all would come to repentance. He's that way with us. He's not quick to just cast us aside because we mess up. His desire isn't to condemn us. I mean, we may do that to ourselves when we mess up, and maybe even to other people. But do you remember what Jesus said in John 3:16 and 17? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. God's desire is not condemnation, it's salvation, it's restoration. But in this passage, I should say, Jesus also makes it clear to Peter that he has something for him to do. In those verses that Randy read for us earlier, we see that Jesus is giving some of his final words. You know, final words are important. We know that. It's kind of like the reading of a will. Things are different now that Jesus has returned from the dead, and he's not with his disciples constantly. He's kind of in and out of their lives. And so when he's in there, they are listening to him fast. They're just taking it all in. And on this particular morning, this encounter between Jesus and Simon Peter, Jesus had just helped these fishermen to catch, anybody remember how many fish? 153. Specifically, it says 153 fish, and he had breakfast with them. And now Jesus is preparing Peter for the next stage. Peter has kind of been the leader of the band, so to speak. He's been the go-getter. If he took one of those personality types, you know, he'd be the dominant personality, right? He's just the one out there doing it now. He was the first one to speak. He's the first one to get out of the boat, right? He's been the one to call others into action, both by his example and by his words. And even though his faults have been very glaring, there is no doubt that he has been the leader of the group. Jesus knows this, and now Peter is going to continue to be a key figure in the establishment of the early church. And not only that, he also serves as an example to us about what it means to serve well. You see, that's what we're called to do. We're called to serve the Lord well. But how do we do that? How do we get that accomplished? Let's look back in our Bibles at what was read earlier, John 21, beginning at verse 15. And this morning we're going to learn about two requirements that we're to meet in order to serve the Lord well. The first requirement is to have a right relationship with the Lord. Look at verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these?" Remember, Simon said that even if they all fell away, he would remain true. So do you love me more than these? "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." And the third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And of course, we know that Peter was hurt because now Jesus had asked him 3 times, like, what, did you not believe me the first 2 times? That's not what it was about. He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Here we see that Peter needs restoration. He needs restoration because when it was time to stand up for Jesus, Peter sat down. When it was time to admit that he was a Jesus follower, he denied him. He denied that he even knew him. And to make it worse, he did it 3 times. He did just as Jesus said he would. And when that rooster crowed, Peter wept bitterly about his failure. And now he needed restoration. Jesus had called him to ministry and to service, but if he doesn't get his relationship right with Jesus, back like it should be, he's not going to know forgiveness, and he's not going to be able to serve the Lord well. He's not going to be able to be trusted. Now, I think that Jesus approached this whole situation a little bit differently than I think most of us would have. Maybe we would have said to Peter, "Why did you deny me? What were you thinking? What do you have to say for yourself? But not Jesus. His question for Peter was, do you love me? You see, Peter must be intimately connected to Jesus. The key issue is love. Did Peter really love Jesus? If he did, then he would be in the right place, and this would be the right foundation for ministry. After all, what did Jesus say is the greatest commandment? To love the Lord our God with all our heart and all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength. But we see that this questioning really struck at the heart of Peter, because Jesus didn't ask him if he loved him just once. He asked him 3 times. And now Peter knows why. He had failed the Lord 3 times. Those failures needed to be reversed by the 3 statements of love from Peter to Jesus. Now, there's differing opinions about the significance of the words that are used in this question and answer time between Peter and Jesus. Because of the different words for love in the Greek, and I'm going to go with the premise that the wording is significant. We're going to see here that Jesus graciously comes to Peter's level. Now, one of the words used for love in this conversation is the word agape, which is the most powerful type of love. It's unconditional, and it's characterized by self-sacrifice. And then the other word that's used in this little conversation is the word phileo, which is more of a deep affection, kind of like the brotherly love that we talk about, the love that might be formed in a family. It's very intense, but it's not quite as powerful as agape. So Jesus' first question is, do you agape me more than these? Again, Jesus asked this question because Peter said that he would outlast the rest. Somehow his love was greater. All the others would deny him, but he would not. But we know that's not what happened. Peter knew now that he could no longer compare himself to those other disciples. He had failed just like that they had, and actually even more so. So he doesn't boast anymore. And his response to Jesus was, you know that I phileo you. You know that I have a deep affection for you. You see, he can't say anything more or higher within himself at this point. And he wasn't going to lie. He wasn't going to say that he had the agape kind of love after he had denied him 3 times. He obviously, at this point, didn't have that kind of love because there was no sacrifice involved. So he's careful not to promise more than he can deliver. And Peter's right in saying that Jesus knows all of this because Jesus knows the worst about us. But he still loves us. But he also knows the best about us, and he knows what we can be. And this is where he's leading Peter. So again, Jesus asked the question, do you agape me? And Peter's reply is the same. You know that I phileo you. Peter had to own this hurt. You see, you can't grow from failures until you acknowledge them, until you own them, until you learn from them. And Peter is beginning that process here. But Jesus isn't finished yet. He asks him one more time. But this time, Jesus changes up his question. He says, Peter, do you phileo me? This is such a great question because on this 3rd time, Jesus is coming down to Peter's level. You see, Jesus graciously meets us right where we are. Peter, perhaps you could call him kind of the original macho man, has been now sized down. His illusions have been cut down. And now Jesus is getting Peter ready for his assignment. Jesus is assigning shepherding responsibilities to him. See, Peter's assignment is going to be this shepherd of people. He's to nourish. He's to care for them. He's to lead them. He's got to work at keeping them growing and going. So we see here that if we are to serve the Lord well, then we must also have a right relationship with him. We must love the Lord our God. And then the second commandment follows it. We must love our neighbor. We say yes to the question, do you love me? And then we say yes to the responsibilities of loving our neighbor. And part of that is helping to keep watch over spiritual lives of each other. You see, we are to care about what God cares about. And then the second requirement that we're to meet to serve the Lord well is to have a right focus. Beginning at verse 18. I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, Lord, who is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he asked him, Lord, what about him? Jesus answered, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me. Because of that, the rumor spread among the brothers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? So here Jesus is wanting Peter to know the cost. He's telling him, I'm going to take you forward on this journey. You're going to live your life for my glory, and one day you will even die for me. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, those would be the most encouraging words, to know that I was going to have to die for him. But you know what? To Peter, these words were priceless. They meant that he was going to succeed. He wasn't going to be stuck as a failure. He was going to live for Jesus, and so much so that eventually he would even die for him. Someone once said, if you want to follow Jesus, you had better look good on wood. This was true for Peter. Eusebius, who was a historian in the early centuries after Jesus, tells us that Peter was crucified by Nero around AD 68. And tradition is that he was crucified upside down because he didn't consider himself worthy to be crucified in the same way his Lord was. Have you ever caught yourself looking around, wondering why others seem to have it so easy? You work hard, and the car breaks down. So instead of getting a new phone, now you have to get a new transmission. Or you'd like to be doing this certain ministry, but God has you doing something else. You know, it's really easy for us to fall into comparisons, especially when the going gets tough. I saw this cartoon. It was a group of church leaders who were having this discussion about different roles. And someone said, well, we have a preacher who wants to direct music, a song leader who wants to preach, and an organist who wants to lead the elder board. Now all we need is an elder who wants to play the organ. Kind of sounds a little bit like Peter at this point. He points at John and his curiosity gets the best of him. What about him? That's what he wants to know. In C.S. Lewis's book, The Horse and His Boy, there's this conversation between the boy and the mighty lion, who's the Christ figure, Aslan. Aslan is recounting to him his sovereign workings in the boy's life, how he was the lion who drove the jackals away while the boy slept. He was the one who comforted him among the houses of the dead, and the one who propelled the boat that brought him to the shore to receive help. And as the boy listened, reflecting on the lion's sovereign claims, he suddenly questioned him, then it was you who wounded Aravis, who is another character in this story. It was I. But what for? Child, said the voice, I am telling your story, not hers. I tell no one any story but his own. This just reminds us that we need to be concerned about our own story, That's what Jesus is telling us. Jesus declines satisfying Peter's curiosity. I mean, pretty much he's saying, well, really, it's none of your business. What I do with John is my business. You see, our primary commitment is to Jesus. He is the head of the church. And if somehow either people let us down or they seem to be more successful than we are, or if they don't suffer in the same way we do, well, if they have different gifts and abilities, it doesn't matter. We're called to fix our eyes on Jesus. He says to us, you must follow me. Our commitment is to him. We're not called to compare. We're called to obey. We're called to follow Jesus. This is the right focus for the one who would serve the Lord well. Now we come to the last verses in John's Gospel, verse 24. This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. John says that there was much more that Jesus did that he didn't write down. So much so that there wouldn't be room enough for all the books in the entire world of the stuff that could be written about him. And although John wasn't able to get it all written down, we can be sure of this. We have what we need. John's biography of Jesus focused on signs which would reveal his identity, and it draws to a close with a challenge. It's a challenge to follow Jesus, just as Peter was challenged. It's a challenge to true commitment. It's a challenge to serve the Lord well. Service done well requires love. To do service, to do ministry, you don't need a certain title. You don't need to be the pastor. You don't need to learn to speak really well. You don't have to be a great people person. It's not about going to school or having a charismatic personality. It's not about having a high IQ or having good looks. There's one basic qualification. Do you love me? And if you love Jesus, then you qualify. Because loving Jesus means having a right relationship with him and having a right focus. Everyone can qualify. It doesn't matter what the past has been. Jesus is about restoration and then helping us to learn to serve. It all begins with loving him. And as Jesus said, if you love him, you will obey his commands. Service done well follows God's will. It says, whatever you want, Lord, I will do. I will die to self. I will follow you no matter what. So the question we have to ask ourselves, is that the kind of Christians that we are today? Do you love me? He asked Peter. I mean, what a question. Imagine having Jesus ask you, do you love me? John, do you love me? Kristen, do you love me? Kathy, do you love me? Fill in your name. It's the question Jesus asks of all of us. Do you love me? The question we still ask is, do you love him? Do you love him so that you can serve him well? Then what we have to do is to be in a right relationship with him and to have the right focus. So think about where you are this morning. We're going to sing a couple very familiar songs, so I'll ask the praise band if they would get into their places. And as we sing these, think about where you are this morning. First song is going to focus on Jesus' love for us. And then we're going to turn that around and focus on our love for him. Let's make the decision to follow him and to serve him well.